Ooh.
So welcome everybody to The Branded Accountant. This is episode 4, entitled There Is No I in Team. And we're going to talk specifically about culture. Last week we spoke about leadership and how a leader can very much be at the heart of generating and keeping a culture alive. But actually it's all about the team as well, and the ways of working that will ultimately ensure that everybody's happy and productive. So without further ado, we shall do our introductions. My name is Philippa Haynes from Insight 101, and we are a brand and marketing consultancy, and we support accountants, strangely enough. And I will go over to you, Richard. Would you like to just introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Richard Brewin. I'm a chartered accountant. I'm also Managing Director of Progress Barmore Brewing. We provide mentoring and coaching services and support for small firms for accountants.
Great stuff. So last week we talked about leadership in quite a lot of detail, didn't we, Richard? And we left the audience with an exercise, which is, do you have a culture in your business? Can you actually see it? When you walk through the office, can you get a vibe? Can you see that everybody is working in the same way? And obviously, we're all in Zoom at the moment, but people are coming back to the offices now. So it does apply. Is there something that holds you together? So that was the exercise that we left everybody with, Richard, wasn't it, last week?
Yes, it was. It's one of those things that is fundamental to any business. You pick up any textbook and it'll tell you, this is how you should run the business. But it's about the feeling that you get when you walk in your firm and about how happy you are. So it's the intangibles that these sort of, that culture drives as much as anything else, and being clear on how you want your business to feel as much as a leader was a good topic last week, and it seemed to go down very well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to be clear about today is that culture, whilst it's always perceived to be quite a soft side of the business, it's actually very potent and very powerful, because culture ensures that there's a unity within the team. There is a sense of direction. Everybody's pulling in the same way, going towards the same kind of goals. There's clarity there as well. And from my perspective, when I work with accountants on their brand and their culture, that one of the key things that comes out is a sense of confidence, and people are suddenly much more confident about what they're doing, how they should work with the client. If a client is challenging them, they feel more able to talk to them about that challenge. It's a sense of, we know what we're doing here. So that's what I've found.
Yes, a firm that has a distinct culture, a clear culture, it is more energetic, it's more focused, it's more driven. People are happier, they're more confident because they understand the environment in which they're working, what's expected of them, what their role is. The clarity of message just seems to help everyone to perform better.
Yeah, and I think that there are multiple examples of where culture really does work, and some of the big brands that we all know about, some have really great cultures, and that is, we don't mean a great brand that does great marketing and then when you pick up the phone it's completely disjointed. We're talking about those businesses that live and breathe their brand day to day. And I know, Richard, we were talking about this in the preparation, and you mentioned, was it Coca-Cola you mentioned that you said had a great brand, with a great culture? I can't remember now.
Oddly enough, I think McDonald's is a very strong one.
Oh, yes, it was McDonald's. Sorry, yes.
Coca-Cola certainly have they present a great culture, but most of us, I guess the majority of us, if we're being honest, experience McDonald's. And with McDonald's, you get what you expect, and you get it every time. And from McDonald's have a very systemized approach towards their culture. They've got a a firm rule book that you abide by, but it's one way of delivering a culture across a mass organization. Obviously, with accounting firms, the sort of firms that we deal with, it's a more personal arrangement. But McDonald's is a great example of how you can get that message through every corner of your business, and how that drives the business and how it impacts on the customers. People know what they're going to get when they get to McDonald's, and they get it. And if you think of the relationship you have with your clients, that's a great position to be in.
Yeah, and one of the messages that I would sort of take really is that it doesn't have to be a really, really large business, a large global brand to drive a culture. I mean, I'm actually working with a very small accountancy practice at the moment, and helping them with their handbook, actually, with all of their brand guidelines in it, because they want people to be embraced as soon as they join the organization, but they also want them to know, how they do things around here. And that's a really nice way of welcoming somebody and getting them into the kind of the bosom of the family, essentially. So you don't have to be the larger firms, the PwCs of this world, etc., where actually they're a massive brand, but because they're so massive, actually, is the culture consistent within that? Potentially not. And so a smaller firm, I believe, has a real opportunity to get it right.
Yes, and I think that can make it more powerful as well, because whereas with the likes of McDonald's or PwC, the culture is a created culture. It's one where those at the top of the board have made a strategic decision on what they want the culture to be. In a small firm of accountants, it's much more personalised. It's created around the leaders of the firm. So if you run your own accounting firm, the culture is your opportunity to stamp your own values and beliefs and ethos across your business. And so it far more closely represents you. And that can make it far more powerful, because it means in doing so, you're attracting team members and you're attracting clients who also reflect those beliefs and values. And that has massive energy and focus and direction and clarity to it.
Yeah, and I think let's have a reminder here, which we've been using over the last couple of sessions, where we've been talking about culture specifically and what it's made up of. And last time we spoke a lot about the leadership side of things and the vision and driving that through the organization. Obviously, today we're talking about the team and we're talking about processes. But as you said, Richard, it's all about engagement of that team. And it's the people who actually work in the firm, but equally it's the clients and it's the suppliers as well. So it's creating that sense of unity and all working together well.
Yes, it's a good representation of what we talk about, really. And as you say, the cycle there that we're showing, because this is moving accounting firms away from the traditional silo model, where it's a very vertical structure, it's process driven, and instead creating a business model that focuses on the three corners of the firm, which is the leadership, the internal processes and the team, and the external processes, the client experience, the brand, the outcome. And as you can see there, if you have a culture that lines all of those up, then the communication between the three of them just adds to the strength of that culture, because you've got three aspects to your triangle all on the same wavelength, all driving in the same direction. This is why it's so important to communicate that culture clearly through your brand, as well as reflect it in your processes, because that's the internals and the externals of your firm.
Yeah, and I think thinking of brand and culture beyond a logo is really important, and that word processes, as you've said, is incredibly important, because that drives the activities of the firm, doesn't it? It drives the training and development, it drives the onboarding and how that works as a journey. It drives just general client service. It pretty much drives everything.
It does, and it provides the tools and the direction for the team to shine as well. Yeah, they both sit there in the same box, and it's very important that that when you're considering the culture of your firm, it's not just a conversation with your team, but the processes that you use, the digital tools that you use, should reflect that same culture. They should all be lined up in the same direction as far as the sort of service that you want to provide your clients is concerned.
Yeah, because we were talking about things like such as channels of communication, that external channel as well, such as LinkedIn. And that's where I think firms that have a culture and really know what the message is, both internally and externally, that they are then much more able to drive that sense of culture in everything that they do, and to use LinkedIn well, and to use that as a form of narrative, but to show a slightly different way of working.
Yeah, LinkedIn's a good example because you can both process it and personalize it, so it can fit in very well from that point of view. If you think, for instance, about the CRM system that you use within your firm, if your culture is all about a very close personal relationship with your clients, then you want a CRM system that is capable of delivering that, rather than one that is less personalized, more obviously systemized. So it's about thinking about how the culture fits into all these different corners of your firm. It's not just, as you say, it's not about picking a clever logo and a smart website. This is how you live and breathe as a firm, and you want your team and your processes to reflect that, because that then has the most powerful impact on that left-hand corner there, on the client experience and on the outcomes for your firm.
Yeah, and I think one of the examples I hear a lot is the onboarding process, that journey of getting clients on board. And I've had a lot of conversations where owners are saying, well, we'll do a video and then we'll do this, which I think is all very well. Those are the tools which potentially deliver that experience, which is essentially what we're talking about, the experience of the culture, etc. But it's the content. So when you know what your brand is about and you know what the culture is, you can say, well, video works best for us, but you can also say, this is what we would need to do with that video. This is the sort of content. This is how we would talk to our clients in the onboarding process. It answers all of those questions really as well, I think.
And it's a good example of why it is so important that your team engage with your culture, because it's fairly easy these days to buy an off-the-shelf solution to your onboarding that will provide a very effective onboarding process. But what happens next? What happens once the client is onboarded? How well do the team then pick that up and move it forward so that it's a seamless process? Or do we get a very obvious switching off of one system and then a gap before the next thing happens?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously it's very easy to talk about culture as a fat word and not be able to give very tangible examples of how that translates. But culture essentially is about, it's the product of the vision that has been set out by the leadership. It may or may not include the team, as we talked about last week, Richard, if you remember. Mm-hmm. But it certainly is around the values, those clear set of values as well, that you want to live and breathe. Now, those values are all very well, but the important bit, the sort of gold dust, if you like, is making sure that those values come to life, so that they're not just words on a board, they're not just words in a book or on the wall. You've seen that a lot. I'm sure I certainly have, where they do that values process development, and then just bung it up to one side and carry on as usual. But actually, once you have those values, they are the foundation stones really to start saying, so what do the elements of our business look like? Even down to, what would we expect to see culturally? If, the value was freedom, for instance, what would we see in our office, what would we hear? You know, what would a meeting be like? What would people say? All of those sorts of things you can start to populate, if you like, and start to say, what is it that this, what do we do culturally within our firm?
And this is where you can see the team engagement starting to accelerate. You're quite right. You know, the leadership of the firm have to be 100% clear on what their vision is for the firm and what their values and ethos are, so that they can then communicate that just as clearly to the team. Once the team understand that message, this is where the team's opportunity to then engage and contribute in that comes to the fore, because once the team are quite clear what the culture is, what the expectation is as regards the relationship with the clients, what sort of relationship we're trying to build, the team can then contribute. You know, they can say, well, why don't we do this? Have we thought of doing this? Here's somewhere where it's not working at the moment. Let's put some energy into that. They can only do that if they're on the same page when it comes to the vision for the firm and to the values that the firm is going to work by. So that communication from the leadership is not only the starting point, but it then unlocks all of the potential that lies within the team and the processes that they use.
Yeah, and I think I was talking to somebody who is quite senior within a firm, and they said actually over the lockdown period, they found that vision and those values incredibly important as tools, because it has been quite a difficult period, certainly with managing a team remotely. But if you can come back to those values which can anchor your business and say, okay, so this is one of the issues that we have. This is a problem that we're dealing with. If we look at our values now, how does that guide us? What does it say we should be doing? And I think that can sometimes act as a really good model for thinking, if you like.
Yes, and it has a real tangible impact as well. It's very, very common when I first go into a firm that the overriding emotion that comes out of that firm is one of frustration, and that's from both the leadership and the team. And when I sit down and talk to them individually, it's very clear that what you have are a group of very good, genuine, honest people, where the leadership want to do right by the team and the team want to fully support the leadership. But because the communication is struggling and because the leadership have lost that vision that they once had, then it's replaced by frustration, because no one is seeing the best out of anybody else and no one is even feeling like they're seeing the best out of themselves. Once you get that back in place, and very, very quickly you get everybody on the same side, and team members who were previously written off in some cases actually become integral to the movement of the firm going forwards. It's those two things that are always lacking. One is the communication, and the other one is the clarity of the vision, of the values. Nobody really knows what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, you know, despite the fact that we're all very different and as individuals, and we all have different profiles and personalities, etc., one of the great truths is that we all thrive in some kind of a structure. From the moment we're born, you know, we apply structure so that people can operate. And structure brings a certain element of creativity as well, because if you're given some confines to think within, then generally speaking, you can be a lot more effective within those parameters, should we say. So I think culture not only helps people to understand where they are and give that sense of unity, but it gives them a structure in which to thrive, essentially. And it's the culture that often is forgotten about, and that can be quite easily broken, I would say. Richard, have you seen examples of that?
Yeah, all the time. Particularly in accounting firms, you know, we have to remember that our training is based around processes and structures, about minimizing risk. It's a very inward-looking training that we receive as accountants. When that's done properly, it provides a good foundation within the firm. But if that starts to break down as well, then there's nothing else to fall back on. And so what clarity of vision, clarity of leadership, clarity of values allows more freestyling in a firm, which can remove a lot of frustration for a lot of accountants, but also I think is potentially more important these days as we deal with the impacts of digitalization. And so, yes, we have to have that foundation, a very clear structure in place. And we see an example of it on screen now, but people want to freestyle, people want to use their imagination and creativity. They want to move out of the box that they're put into as accountants. And you have to have clear culture to do that.
Yeah, and actually, I'm seeing increasingly practices coming to me and saying, do you know what? We have a great culture, but in essence, nobody outside of the firm knows about it. So if you look at our website, if you look at all of that, those marketing pieces, if you like, it doesn't really say who we are. Now, that sounds in many ways quite petty, but in fact, it's incredibly important because people want to feel a sense of pride for where they work. They also want to kind of feel that the culture and who they are reflects where they work as well. You know, that's kind of important. And for those people to really perform, there needs to be that kind of feeling of pride, because actually the people who work in your firm are brand ambassadors. They are the best people to do your marketing for you. So it's incredibly important that you embrace them. You know, there've been a couple of examples where even the brand, the name has changed because it just didn't reflect the people within the firm. Now that's a sort of obviously a relatively extreme example, but it has happened. And actually the result of that is that the team feels more fired up, much fresher and more energized as a result.
And you see the same impact with clients as well. You know, a client who happily refers your firm is effectively a brand ambassador. Yeah, they like what they experience, they like what they see, and they want to share it. You know, we all like to be part of a club. We all like to be part of something that adds value to ourselves. And the same applies to clients and to team members. If they have an accountant that they themselves are proud of, it shows that they themselves have made a good decision, either working with that firm or using that firm as their professional advisors. So I think, again, you know, where we see the situation where firms don't believe that their brand properly reflects their culture, it's not necessarily just an issue with the brand. It means that they've not yet got that culture fully embedded, because once it's there, it should be strong enough to shine the light anyway. Yes, you can then clarify that with the brand. But the starting point is to have those, you know, that internal setup so that the culture is strong from within, and then it grows out. You can't create a culture by sticking a great brand onto a poor business. You know, what you can do is create a culture from within, and that would put the brand design in a very powerful position to then expand on that.
Yeah. Well, what have you seen with the accountants that you work with and support? What have they been able to put in place? Are there some good examples of that, or is it something that happens over time? What have you seen?
I think it happens over time, but it doesn't have to be a long period of time.
Yeah.
Once that first hurdle has been crossed, once the leaders of the firm have that clarity of vision and have that clear understanding of their values and ethos, that puts the energy and the drive and the focus back into the leadership of the firm. And once you've established that, you can move everything else forward very, very quickly. A lot of the problems that they have seen with the team can almost melt away, because all of a sudden the team have got bosses who are energized and know what they're doing, and that makes a world of difference. So it has to start with that. In my experience, the starting point is always the same. No matter where you think you are on the curve, the starting point has got to be to go back to the leadership and say, okay, let's make sure we're clear on what we're trying to do here, and we're clear on what really matters to you as people that your firm delivers on. What are those key characteristics in your firm, those key values that we want your team to reflect and we want your clients to reflect? Then it's a matter of, okay, once they're in place, right, how do we do this? Let's call the team in, let's look at our brand, let's look at our website, let's look at our offices, let's look at the processes that we go through with our clients. We can use all of those to then build on the impact of that, but the starting point is always the same, and that's the bit. If you can't break that bit, you're not going to progress anywhere else.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, certainly with what Insight 101 does, with the refresh of a brand, or actually the creation from scratch of a brand, that is a very good, it can be a very good starting point for obvious reasons, because if everybody's been involved in the process and everybody has something that they think reflects them, it's a shiny new kind of start, if you like. Then there can be a lot of internal communications that can come as a result of that. So I've been working with a firm that has got really excited about it, and there's been an official launch. The leaders have sent out little gifts to everybody, using the kind of the theme of the brand and the culture. So everything is flowing. There's celebrations of birthdays within the sort of guidelines of the brand, etc., etc. So suddenly, out of what was quite a wasteland, actually, there's now quite a really well-defined way of doing things, which almost sets the tone. And that, people buy people, people follow people, and obviously the leadership team are very important. They have to be living it every day, and you need to see evidence. You need to see tangible evidence that it is being lived every day, whether that is the leaders referring to the values all the time. And some people say to me, oh, we feel like we're repeating ourselves, but repetition is incredibly important, and you can't say things enough, because actually people don't hear things the first time, the second time, the third time. They only really hear it if you are absolutely wedded to it, and you keep going back to that, and then people begin to learn that that's the way that it's going to work from now on, and that brings a certain power with it, I think.
Yes, and it ensures that you get that consistency of culture as well, which is so important. It's not a one-off exercise. It's not something that ends once you've redesigned your website and repainted your offices. As you said earlier, this is something that as a firm you live and breathe. And we all have good days and bad days. We all have days where we come into the office and we're not at our best, and we've had a frustrating journey in, or a bad day the previous, and we need those reminders in the office that say, okay, right, well, now you're here, let's just remember what we're trying to do here. Let's just remember what, the impressions that we're looking to create. I like to see things on the wall, but they're not the culture itself. So if someone's got a motivational poster on the wall, I think I like to see that sort of thing, but don't just point at that and go, look, that's what we are, because that's how it should feel as soon as I walk in the office. And that's where I like about culture. It's the way it brings the intangible and the tangible together. So, a lot of it you measure in intangibles. Does it feel right? Does it sound right? Does it look right? Is this what we wanted to do? And then you can flip that over to the tangibles. Okay, so what are we doing with that? What is that delivering in terms of results? What are we seeing in terms of satisfaction surveys? How are we seeing the client numbers change, for instance? We can bring the two sides of the business together. But the starting point has always got to be those intangibles. Is this it? Is this right?
Yeah.
You may not know why it isn't, but it doesn't feel right. In which case, let's get some other people in. Let's get the team in. Let's get some like ourselves in. Let's work out why this doesn't feel right.
Right. Yeah. So let's pull this all together then. We asked people to go away last time to just get a sense of whether there was a culture or not within their firm, you know, sort of walk through the door or whatever it is, you know, sort of sit back on a Zoom meeting or whatever it was and just say, is there a sense of culture there? You know, can we feel it? Obviously now, whether you say yes or no, I guess, to that question, it may be, what do we need to do about it if there isn't the perception of culture? And of course, we would both, you know, counsel looking at your vision and values. But if there is a sense of culture, and a lot of people say, yes, there is a culture within our firm, but a lot of people equally aren't able to define that. They just say it's a feeling. And sometimes having a feeling isn't enough, because if it's a feeling, you can't communicate that out. So you can't say to a client, oh, it's a feeling. You know, you have to say, actually, this is what we're about. So one of the exercises we think would be useful for those listening in today are to think about the values that you have within the organization and to start to plot against those and say, what is it that, what actions and behaviors do we expect to see? And you could break it down in terms of onboarding, just general communication internally, etc., but start to write down what the expectations are of that business.
Yes, I think it's a great exercise to do with the team, certainly with your senior team members, you know, the people who are more integral in the firm, if you like. But this idea of, yes, let's list our values, but as you say, Philippa, it's more about digging into what that means. So you may say, okay, we want to be professional, we want to be happy, we want to be respectful. Okay, what does that mean? What does being happy mean in this context? What does being professional mean in this context? So that you can pull out those something that's far more specific. And as you say, is that reflected in how we behave? Is it reflected in our brand? Is it reflected in the processes and the systems that we use, the conversations that we have with our clients? And if it isn't, what can we do to strengthen that? What can we do to make that clearer? It's okay you're saying we want to be professional, but what does that mean to our clients? What do our clients see as being professional? Does it come across? And I think that the more, I always say this is where you revert to a 5-year-old and you keep going, why? And until you run out, until you've got to that basic level where, okay, I can't ask myself any more questions. This is as specific as it gets. That then enables you to say, right, how do we measure that? How do we track that? How do we ensure that that is reflected in everything that we do, everything that we say? How do we ensure that it's clearly perceived externally?
Yeah, totally right. And I mean, just as an example, I worked with quite a large business a few months ago, and they one of their values was about being supportive. They probably use different language than that, at least I hope they did. But that means if somebody in a meeting comes up with a new idea, rather than going, oh no, we've done that before, it's okay, tell us more. How can we build on that idea? Where is it coming from? So giving somebody the time to explain themselves. So it's as simple as that. Those are the sorts of tangibles, but it does mean that there is a structure for behavior, a structure for the way that people work in meetings, etc., whatever that means for your firm. Okay. Well, as we always say at this stage, if you do have any questions as a result of this half an hour, then Richard and I are very, very happy to talk through a little bit more and answer those questions. Richard, anything to say on that?
Simply to say, go and have some fun with this. You sitting down with your team having these sort of conversations shouldn't be a tedious exercise. You can have a lot of fun. Just do some exploring and see where it takes you. Great.
Thanks, Richard. So next time, episode 5, we're still going to be talking about culture, but we're going to be talking about outcomes and also communication. So that's then sort of moving from the internal workings of the team to how does that drive externally as well. So that's where we'll leave it today. Great to be here again. Thanks, Richard, for your input. A pleasure as always. And we will see